Before we begin, thank you very much to Jojira for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the support. Thank you so much for helping out and keeping the channel going. Means the world to me. And I keep saying that every single time. It's true every single time. So I don't want it to sound disingenuous because I keep repeating it, but it is genuinely true that the only reason I can continue to do this is because you guys have been supporting me in all these different ways, and I am always thankful for it. So, it is an important day, however. It is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all of the dads out there. Congratulations, this is your day. But because it is Father's Day, I decided, let us talk about the fathers in the Transformers franchise. That seems like an obvious thing to do at some point, now doesn't it? And it's an interesting topic to me because in doing the research for this, there's some that came to mind immediately, and then there's some I had to be reminded of, and then some directions that I hadn't even considered. There's actually a lot to this. For a fiction where familial connections really shouldn't be possible, because they're robots, it actually happens quite often, because as human writers who tend to have fathers, sons, siblings, etc., we tend to actually have, those things in mind when we write stuff, and it just happens to end up on a page. And then we figure out how to explain it later on. The point being, there was a lot to it. There's a lot more to it than I ever thought of. Also, before we begin, just in case if you're wondering the context of why Prime looks like this, sorry, just explained where kids come from. I love this scene. But if we're going to talk about fathers in the Transformers fiction, then obviously we're going to start with Starsaber and John. So this is a reason why I love Starsaber so much, because he is written as a father. John is a human child that he rescued and adopted, and it shows. It's strange to see a Transformer, go to what is the equivalent of a parent-teacher conference because his son needs to be enrolled in a human school. And it's interesting and fascinating because it's not a situation that a Transformer would ever normally be part of, but that's what makes Starsaber interesting. And it's not even as simple as, he's going through the motions because this is what has to be done. No, he's earnest about this. He is actually proud of being a dad and proud of John as a son. It's a fascinating way, and it really does kind of color the way that he leads his troops. Like, he does come across like the Supreme Commander type that they like to write in Japan. But there is a context that is added to it because he is a father, and where a lot of this comes from is a little bit different than where, Jinrai or Optimus Prime before him would have gotten their leadership style. It is a fascinating look, and it's a very cool look as well. I really, really like Starsaber for this aspect. He's not alone, though. Oh, no. There are actual fathers in Transformers. We have to move to Lio Convoy in order to find another one. So the weird way in which Lio Convoy came to life did bond them in a weird father-son way. And it's something they play into, of obviously Lio Jr. Obviously, they kind of play to this. And it's a different dynamic because Lio Convoy wants to be seen as the commander of the Cybertrons. He doesn't really want to be a father, but now here's Lio Jr., and Lio Jr. really does see him as a dad. He will capitulate and refer to his dad as commander. That's not the relationship he wants, and as the series goes on, he becomes more insistent about acknowledging Lio Convoy as his father. And Lio, to his credit, does come to accept that role more and more as the show goes on. Toward the end, they are fighting together, father and son, and it's a great little bit of growth that you don't normally get to see a convoy have. The one thing about the Beast Wars 2nd and Beast Wars Neo shows is that their convoys actually did have a growth arc where they became better leaders or grew into this new role they found themselves in, which is not something you typically get. Typically, Optimus Prime is an anchor point. He's where every other character kind of revolves around and orbits in order for their growth and change to happen. It's very rare when an Optimus or a Prime or a Convoy or what have you actually gets to have that kind of development, and this is a really good example of that. We have another instance with Grimlock and the Technobots. So when Nosecone first activates in Grimlock's new brain, he actually asks, "Are you my father?" And Grimlock's response is, "I would rather you think of me as your fellow Autobot." And they kind of leave it at that, but it does plant that idea into the fiction. So when the Unite Warriors box set for Computron came out, they came up with this kind of one-page story where the Technobots discover what Father's Day is and try to surprise Grimlock, only for him to come in a little bit too soon and nothing to be ready. In the way that parties, kind of become chaotic when that happens. So it's a lot of fun little shenanigans on screen, and yeah, it is a way of like expanding the fiction to go, yeah, the Technobots still kind of see Grimlock as dad, even if he said not to, even if he's dumb as a stick again. But hey, it's what you do as a kid. That's what you do for Father's Day. It looks like a great time. Don't get me wrong. There's Energon wine that's falling everywhere. There's Energon. What are those little Energon cubes? They looks like little Jellos. Looks like little Jello squares. And Scattershot apparently trying to make a cake from Energon. Didn't know that was possible. I might need to do a video that is just the various applications for Energon, because this goes pretty far. This goes pretty far. Also, if you're wondering, yeah, that's Marissa Fairborn's kid in the bottom left with her dad. I can't remember his name because he's a one-off character, but that's apparently canonical. If we're looking at other Transformer characters, you could see Alpha Trion as the father of Optimus Prime. Now, technically, Orion Pax is already born, but Optimus Prime was rebuilt from Orion Pax thanks to Alpha Trion. And from the times we've seen them together, it does seem very clear that that is Optimus Prime's mentor figure, and probably would have been very fatherly to him, especially in the early years of the war, where Alpha Trion kind of has to show him the ropes, tell him how things are done, and kind of has to guide him along. He didn't immediately become the greatest general in the history of Transformers. He had to have some guidance. He had to have someone to teach him what the role meant and, how to actually act as an Autobot and a leader. So we can owe Alpha Trion a lot of that, and it's very clear, even in the few interactions they had on screen, it is clear that Optimus does see Alpha Trion as a very important figure to him. So while it's never anything canonical, there's no words of it spoken, yeah, I could absolutely see a father-son relationship there. Now, if we go back to the Japanese fiction, you're going to find a lot of instances of this because they just kind of wrote these familial ties in with a lot of characters, and that just because it's part of storytelling, characters that are married, characters that have kids, characters that have, parents, things like this, that they just wanted to create relatable stories. So you get weird things. Did you know Kurata had a father? Because that slipped my memory. He had a father that was killed by Ella Forca. So the hat that Kurata wears, as far as the Beast Wars Neo manga goes, that is his father's hat. That is his father's hat that he continues to wear to this day. That's a weird way of explaining his, his Desperado-esque design. But you know what? I kind of like it. Like, it gives him a little bit more character. That's, a lot of those characters from Second and Neo don't get a whole lot of fiction these days. So any little bit that got added in, not a bad thing. We can even go further back to this, and we can go back to Victory, because all of the Dino Force had kids. These are the kids of the Dino Force. Some in shell, some out of shell. There was a whole... In the Victory manga is so different from the actual show. In there, the Decepticons in the show actually seem to be acting against the Autobots, or I should say, Destrons. They're acting against the Cybertrons. mostly because they have family that's in danger. And they have, we see, like, we have like Lyzak, which is Leozak's wife, who just looks like a female version of him. You figure out the psychology of that. I don't have the time or energy for it. But yeah, apparently everyone in the Dino Force is a dad. Don't know where the mothers are, but they all have kids. So happy Father's Day to all the dinos out there. And then there's weird connections they make and never really do anything with. Six Shot is the father of Quick Switch. They don't really do anything with that. It's just something mentioned in a bio blurb. And the interesting thing to me is it never really mentions the lineage and like what point the lineage is made. Is Quick Switch the son of Six Shot, who then rejected his father's ways and joined the Autobots? Or was Six Shot already in the process of leaving the Decepticons and thus taught his son better ideals? Or is like the whole point of like, is Six Shot actually Great Shot, the Autobot Six Changer, that then had a son who took after his father? I don't know. Like there's a chronological order to things that is never explained with this particular one. Not that they do anything with the familial connection story-wise. As you can see, plenty you could do with it, just in the timing alone. But, it's a weird one. And if I start going through, there are a lot of mentions, especially in Japanese fiction, of father-sons, father-daughter relationships, that kind of thing, that they just kind of sprinkle through the stories that never really get elaborated on, don't really explain how or why. It's just a thing. It's just a thing. And then there's whatever Scorponok did. We don't talk about this one. This one was just a super weird story beat that was at the very tail end of IDW 1.0, and they never got the chance to expound upon this. Maybe for the best, because this is super weird. This is super weird. But those are the robotic fathers. I would be remiss if we didn't mention at least a few of the human ones, because of course there's a big human element to all of this. And of course, the first one would be Sparkplug Witwicky, the father of Spike. Spike, you got a lazy eye thing going on over here. We're over here. Keep it. Okay. You're doing fine, Spike. You're doing fine. Sparkplug is, admittedly, I don't feel like he got, because Spike is supposed to be your human contact character, because he's learning about the Transformers and going on their adventures through them. Sparkplug most of the time hangs back. He is, a father that brought his son into the oil working industry, and then his son brought the father into the saving the world with, by helping these giant mechanical beings industry. But season 1 especially, you can usually find the two together. Sparkplug in general helps a ton with the repair of different Transformers. And so, yeah, he was like the first depiction we got of just like a good, supportive father figure. And if we go through the Marvel comics, all the follow-up comics from here, Sparkplug's role and even his name changes wildly throughout all of them. So we're going to boil it down to just the most recent, which is the version of Sparkplug from the Skybound book. And this is just Sparky, not Sparkplug, just Sparky, because he's not a repairman. He's a former soldier, a soldier who has a lot of shell shock from just the deaths that he saw during his time in the wars, but also lost a son. So he has a lot of his traumas that are plaguing him, his own demons. And because of that, and because of what happens to his own son in the process of the Autobots and Decepticons landing on Earth, he decides the one thing he can do to actually make his life worth something is to sacrifice it to save Optimus Prime, who can then save his son and thus the rest of the world. And it's leading to something even more interesting, because it seems like whatever Sparky did to actually integrate himself into the Matrix has had an effect on Optimus Prime that might lead to a more familiar relationship with Spike in the long run. We have to wait to see how exactly that plays out, but it's going into an interesting direction. Of all the fathers I could bring up in Transformers, the one I feel for the most is Isaac Sumdac. This was a career man. Did not have a wife, did not have kids, apparently didn't plan on it. All he had was the biggest robotics corporation in the country. So when a protoform ends up in his lab that decides to take his DNA for its alt form, basically forming an infant in the process, he's just a dad now and has to juggle the responsibility of, his technology company with raising a daughter. That's a lot. It's more so when that daughter literally transforms into a teenager. She goes from like 10 to like 16 in the span of a few hours. Really instantly, if we're being honest here. And now has to also figure out the whole, I mean, to his credit, he got to skip puberty, so he didn't have to deal with that. But he does have to adjust to his daughter now being a full teenager and being incredibly smart as her Cybertronian side starts to present itself. So, all of a sudden, daughter's outclassing daddy in a few places, out of nowhere. So he's had it. As a father, he had a rough time. He had a real rough time as a dad. So give all the credit to Isaac. Father's Day is a day for him. He needs to be celebrated this day. The most recent, of course, is Alex Malto. And the reason I like him as a father figure is because of the way the Terrans work in Earthspark. Because you do have this familial connection. And the whole point is that these Transformers see the Maltos as their family. Robbie and Mo are their siblings. They are not just humans they pal around with like we've seen before. They talk about each other and treat each other as if they are genuinely related. And the same is true of the parents. At no point, after the initial explanations are out of the way, at no point do the parents, including Alex, actually treat the Terrans as anything different than their own children. There's a lot more to teach them because, they're just now discovering this Earth and themselves. So there's a lot of hoops and things to jump through. But to their credit, for all the twists that brought into their lives, they treat the Terrans exactly as they would as children. They are, they make no judgment against them. They give them no quarter because they're Cybertronians and, technically built for battle. They are just treated like part of the family, and it's a really, it's for me, I feel like it's a wonderful connection to see because it does tell such a different story. And it makes Alex himself just being like the Transformers fanboy. That's already kind of fun. And then we're working this fatherly element into it as well. And even getting just to see him be a father to, Robbie, times that they have connected. That's great too. So he's been a good father figure. Really good. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Optimus Prime himself, because while no character in the Transformers fiction has ever referred to him as father, he does inspire a lot, and to a lot, he was something of a father figure. In this franchise, in the history of Transformers, we know of at least 2 fans who have legally named themselves Optimus Prime because of this character. The first was a man who lost his father when he was very young. So eventually, as an adult, Scott Nell renamed himself Optimus Prime in honor of the character that he wishes his father had been, the character from the G1 cartoon. That Optimus Prime inspired him. That was his father figure. And it's one that inspired him to enlist in the military. He fought in Iraq. He was a firefighter there, and I believe continued to be a firefighter afterwards. Could be mistaken on that last part. It's one of those stories that was brought up and then rarely followed up upon. But it's just a show of just how strong of a character the original Optimus was, that it could inspire someone not only to take the name of the character, but also to actually live their life by his example. This real life Optimus Prime actually is a hero. He actually did commit his life to saving other people's lives. That's kind of amazing, you know? And then there's an Optimus Prime who recently stole a car. So it's not, doesn't really inspire everyone. Mileage may vary. That doesn't work out for everybody. But you know what? It worked out at least once, and I'll take that. So, there's your basic rundown of fathers in the Transformers fiction, and even a few that leave fiction. Overall, yeah, for a franchise that's about robots from outer space that really shouldn't be procreating, there's actually a lot of stories about dads in Transformers, and are all kind of interesting in their own ways. So, yeah, feel free to explore this, because this is something I think a lot of people don't even think about, but it's an interesting thing nonetheless. So, once again, happy Father's Day to everyone out there, and as always, I will see you next time.